There is another option in the options menu which is called the advanced option. Now the advanced option, I must warn you that if you don't understand the settings which are in the advanced option, don't touch them, because this is mostly for the advanced users which have been using the machine for a longer period of time, and it's if you want to experiment, if you want to do your own experimentation with the 3D printer, then use it with care, and also consult us through email or by phone before doing anything. So the first parameters are for the serial port. Here you can change the speeds, but you can't really change the speeds for now. It's mostly for us, because the firmware on the control unit itself is set to a specific speed, so if you change it here, it will basically just not communicate with the control unit. So unless we notify everyone to change it, there is no need to touch this one. Now for the web camera, you have a lot of controls here for the camera itself. You can change a lot of parameters like video quality, resolution, rotation and other things. Well, the defaults will be fine. If you want to change it, if you have a dark environment and want to brighten up the image, or if you want to darken it, you can do these things here. Also, if you have a slow internet connection, it may be advisable to lower a bit the video quality or other settings. If you want, you can play around with this. It won't affect anything on the printer itself. On the Ethernet, again, there is not much to do unless you know what you're doing, so it should be obvious for anyone who has done Ethernet connections before. Wireless is the same thing, we just give you more options here to choose from. Also note that if you connect an internet connection to the Ethernet port on the Ilios user interface, then the Wi-Fi becomes automatically the hotspot. So for example, if you have an internet connection on the Ethernet, you can actually connect a notebook or a mobile phone to the Ilios Wi-Fi, and your notebook as well as the mobile phone will have internet as well, so it works as a hotspot. It's just a feature we did. I mean, we have Wi-Fi, so why not do it anyway? So also Ilios, the Ilios user interface acts like a hotspot for you, so you don't actually need to buy a hotspot device. Now here we go to the more advanced features. Now this is mostly for material handling. For those who have Ilios Ray, I will explain in as detailed as I can what these things mean. Essentially what you have here are the set parameters which we have on the firmware, and you have the option to change them. In this case, these parameters control the viscosity and are defined by the viscosity of the resin and type of the resin you use. We begin with the resin level rate, which is essentially how long and how fast the tanks and pigments and everything else will fill up. And this option shouldn't be touched as much as the rest, so for the time being just leave it. And let's continue with the cartridge level maximums. These values, the cartridge at 1, 2, 3 and 4, the value essentially means for how long the pump should pump in the resin. Now if you have a very low viscosity material, it will pump a lot faster into the tanks, so this value should be lower. If you have a high viscosity resin, this value should be higher because you need more time for the liquid to actually pump inside the tanks. The 450 which we have is essentially the defaults for the Ilios materials for the spot HT material which we have, which is medium viscosity resin. The same goes for the pigments, but because the pigments are very low viscosity liquids, you don't need much time to actually empty them, because in our case we don't actually fill up the pigment tanks, we just empty them. So that's the rate by which the pigment mixing is determined. Also the mix tank values are here, but the mix tank doesn't actually it doesn't harm it if you overfill it, because there is a sensor inside the mix tank, and if it goes to the maximum level it will stop itself, and it will also automatically redefine the level maximum value for you. So this value doesn't matter much unless you want a specific quantity of liquid inside the mix tank. And the watt level maximum, this also doesn't matter as much, because there is a sensor on Ilios Ray for the liquid level, and it's an optical sensor, so when the liquid reaches a certain level the liquid filling will stop itself, unless once again you want to stop it before it actually fills up the liquid just above the sensor. And the option you have here, send on startup, automatically these settings, if you press send now, the parameters will change for the current time when you have the printer turned on. So if you turn it off, this will not the settings will not affect the defaults on the control board. So if you want these settings to apply the next time you turn on the printer, then you need to click this option here to send on startup automatically, so the next time it will send it automatically. Now let's go into the motor controls. For each printer this will be specific, but in general the parameters will be more or less the same. Now the lift ramp up down speed is essentially how fast the lift ramps up the speed up or down. This is set to 40 for the time being. The servo lift strut length and servo lift slide length, these values are for calibrating the Z stepping on Ilios Ray, because we have a triangulation there and the lift is moving differently from Ilios HD. These values are mostly for mathematical calculations and you don't really need to touch them that much. Now we have here the servo lift step maximums. This is the maximum steps for the lift. Now once again, try not to exceed this, because if the motors go more than they have to, then they will hit on the sensor and they will stop, but they may stop abruptly. So because we have a ramp down speed, it's basically better to just leave the settings alone. Also we have the lift print cycle pull up. This value is essentially how much the lift will pull up from the watt after each layer, so that new resin can fill in the gaps. If you want to have faster prints, you can decrease this value so that the lift goes less up and down every time. Also in some cases we disable after a while this motion so that we can print faster, because the vacuum effect will degrade over the once the lift reaches a certain height, so this value won't matter much. But if you want faster speeds, then you can experiment with this. Also the watt tilt motor delay, this is essentially what's controlling for how much the watt will actually tilt. If you have Ilios Ray or the tilting watts on Ilios HD kits, this value will essentially, the lesser it is, the less the watt will tilt down, and the more the value is, the more it will tilt down. So also be careful not to make it too much, because we have a sensor on the top of the tilting mechanism, which means when it goes up back again it will stop automatically, but for the down action it will actually doesn't have a limit, so don't make it too much. Now the lift step delay minimum, this is essentially what's controlling the motor speeds. If you make this smaller, it will move the motors faster. I don't recommend changing these parameters unless you know what you're doing. So if you don't know what you're doing, basically don't touch this. For the laser step delay minimum, this is for the gantry which has the laser on board for the Ilios Ray, and essentially that's what it does. It controls again the speed of the gantry. while printing, this doesn't actually affect the speed, because the speed is calculated based on the communication between the user interface and the control board, so this won't affect anything during the print cycle. And lift step delay maximum, laser step delay maximum, this is for when the motors are in their slowest position. So when the print is happening, the motors will be in their fastest position. When the print is not happening, you're just controlling it, they will be in their slower mode. Now the lift step delay print is for the print cycle. When the actual print cycle is happening, some of the motions will be slower, and this is what's controlling, because this value is different for the print cycle than it is for the control cycle. And once again, we have the lift slide position. If you have the slide option turned on, this is basically controlling for how much the slide is going to happen. So the more this value is, the more the sliding motion will be. And once again, we have here the send on startup automatically. If you want these values, when you change them, to apply automatically on startup, then you need to have this ticked. Now for withdrawal parameters, this is mostly for the Ilios for research, which use a laser, and for Ilios Ray. The draw start delay is a delay which is for the scan line, and essentially this value will imagine this as the zero starting point of the laser scan line. So the more this value will be, then the laser scan line will start after a certain period of time. That means that the actual scan line will be shorter. So you can say that it's actually controlling the scale of the scan line itself. This is useful if you want to change where the laser actually starts to draw. But this is, once again, this is for Ilios Ray, because the Ilios laser doesn't work like that. It doesn't use scan line, it uses the X and Y axis to do the same process, where Ilios Ray just uses the X axis, and the Y is the scan line itself, which is faster. The draw begin delay is when after we started the scan line, when we actually start to draw the pixels. The draw end delay is actually when we end the pixels, so the actual time it takes for the scan line to start and for the scan line to stop is the difference between these two values. And the draw pixel count maximum is actually the pixel density of the scan line itself. In our case on Ilios Ray, the Y axis, which is the scan line, is 9920 pixels per scan line. That's for the maximum resolution. And for the draw repeat count, this is by default set to 4, but this value is controlled by the Ilios 3D Suite, and what this basically means is that how many passes will the laser do before it goes to the next column. So the laser scan line will draw the laser at the same spot 4 times before it goes to the next column. But this also is controlled by the material type in Ilios 3D Suite. If we go to the laser controls, this is mostly for the actual spinning of the laser mirror. I don't recommend changing this unless you really know what you're doing, because these values control the motor speed up and slow down delays, and if you ramp it up too fast or too slow, then there is a chance that it will actually halt, and due to the frequencies and some other parameters inside the firmware, this may actually freeze the firmware and you have to restart the printer again. So just in short, the ramp up speed is what makes the higher the value is, the slower the laser will start to spin up, and the ramp down speed is the lower the value, the faster the laser will actually stop after it finishes a scan line. If you stop it too abruptly, there is a chance that it may damage the actual mirror, so it has to stop very slowly. For the acceleration, it doesn't really matter. There is a specific number which you have to specify. If you started too fast, it may not work properly. If you started too slow, it will just start slow, it won't affect anything. There is one sweet spot which you use, and that's the 32 number which we have. I don't recommend changing it unless you don't have anything else better to do. And the acceleration delay is how fast or slow both of these values are affected. And we also have the power. You have the option to restart the printer through the web interface. So if you cannot access the printer and you're not on site, you can actually restart it, and it will restart the user interface as well as the control board. It will reset it automatically. And once again, we are in the info panel. So I hope this explanation was informative, and thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to post in the forum or just send us an email. Thank you.